Hello, and welcome to Attract, Prepare, Retain, the 2020 OSEP National Summit on Improving Effective Personnel for Children with Disabilities. Before we get started, there are a couple of housekeeping items to cover that will guide you on how to interact with today's presentation. Today's presentation is broadcasted live, and all attendees will be muted for the duration of this event. Make sure that your computer speakers are not muted and the volume is turned up. To share your thoughts, comments, and observations on the content of the summit, please use the event's chat box located to the right of the main screen. If you do not see the chat box, please click the chat button on your Intrado control panel. If you would like to ask a question to presenters or event moderators during the summit, simply type your question in the Q&A panel located to the right of the main screen. To access the closed captioning for this event, please click the CC button on your Intrado control panel. Should you lose audio or video at any time, please refresh your browser. If you need further technical assistance, you can enter your question in the Q&A panel. At the conclusion of today's presentation, a brief evaluation survey will appear. Please make sure to complete the survey and provide us with feedback on the content of today's presentation. Now let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to the second presentation of our Attract, Prepare, Retain Summit. For those of you joining us today for the first time, I'm Lori Vanderploeg, the Director of the Office of Special Education Programs. Thank you for joining us. We were scheduled to have this summit last March, but as you all know, our lives changed suddenly, and although we wish we could have this event in person, the silver lining is this issue is one that impacts us all. And having a virtual event allows us to share this information more broadly. Yesterday, we began the summit with an inspiring presentation exploring innovative ways we can attract effective personnel to the profession of teaching. Today, we will explore the area of preparation, the area we have traditionally invested the majority of our time and federal support. And tomorrow, we will conclude exploring how we retain effective personnel for children with disabilities. The structure of this presentation will be the same as yesterday. We've invited experts from the fields to share their expertise in each of these areas. A panel of practitioners in education and related fields to share their perspectives and experiences as a special educator, to summarize the research, lessons learned, and leverage points for moving forward. Our focus this week is to explore innovative and creative possibilities, to challenge the status quo, and to challenge each of us to reconceptualize how we attract, prepare, and retain effective personnel. I've been a lifelong educator, and during my past 2 years at the U.S. Department of Education, my primary focus has been on improving our ability to attract, prepare, and retain effective personnel for children with disabilities. This is the most critical, and as we all work towards improving outcomes for children with disabilities, there is not a more important leverage point than ensuring that each child has a positive relationship with an effective teacher or provider. And our collective focus should be on supporting the practices and systems that make a reality for every child. I've had the pleasure of talking with many of our presenters over the past week, and I think you will hear, as I have, both an inspirational message and a call to action from the remarks they will share with us today. Yesterday, our presentations began with an expert on the professional chef. Today, an expert from nursing, and tomorrow, we conclude with an expert who has studied retention policies of successful companies. All have important lessons to share regarding the changes experienced within their fields that may be useful as we look for innovative paths forward within education. As I said yesterday, we have structured this event not as a culminating one of our work to date, but rather an infusion of thought and possibility into the ongoing discussions and work being done by organizations, training institutions, schools, and individuals all over this country. Please help us disseminate this information to others to enhance and push forward current efforts, to explore innovative and creative solutions with our colleagues and within your communities. As we heard yesterday, and we will echo throughout the summit, ensuring effective personnel for children with disabilities is a shared responsibility and requires a collaborative approach. Shortly after the summit concludes tomorrow, we'll have the tape versions posted at the ideasthatwork.org that you are encouraged to share. At that site, you will also find a new resource page on Attract, Prepare, and Retain that brings together federal resources, state efforts, and resources from related organizations that you may find useful in your own efforts, whether you are a practicing teacher, administrator, state or district leader, organization, or community leader. Today's focus is on preparing personnel to effectively serve children with disabilities. One of the most important is determining whether a teacher stays in the profession for 3 to 5 years is the quality of their preparation. I'm hoping today that we can expand our concept of what preparation means, expanding from the formal academic training to a longer process of growth that extends into the initial years of teaching. We also know that a strong preparation program is the key factor in being able to retain effective personnel, a topic that we will focus on more tomorrow. One of the markers of a high-quality preparation program is the time dedicated to observation of expert teachers and hands-on experiences with children, real and simulated, coupled with specific feedback. These hands-on experiences should begin early in a training program and continue throughout. We are also learning the value of at least one portion of that practice experience taking place in more challenging, high-need settings. Unfortunately, we know traditionally many of our first-year teachers have their first solo experiences in more challenging schools with little support. If we know that is the case, then the guided practice and preparation programs should include feedback, support, and practice in those schools. We also have learned much about the core practices every teacher should know and be able to do. The high leverage practices that lead to improved academic and behavioral outcomes for children. Again, if you aren't familiar with the OSEP Cedar Center, I encourage you to visit that site for more information and resources. We also know that preparation does not stop once a teacher walks into his or her first year in the classroom. But in many schools around the country, that is a reality for beginning teachers. I am challenging us to reconceptualize how we think about attracting, preparing, and retaining teachers. And this is an example of an area we must rethink. Preparation for teachers and providers must not stop when they walk in that door for the first time. Their preparation must extend into their first years as a professional. Induction and mentoring programs are critical to further develop and ensure the success of beginning teachers, especially those entering the profession in more challenging positions, such as low-income schools, rural settings, and many special education positions. Other professions have recognized and supported the phases of preparation and induction to the profession much better than we have in education. And we have to find the resources to support this critical phase of development. We are losing too many teachers who want to teach, have their formal training and credentials, but are not given the early support needed to fully gain their footing in the profession. When we think about preparation, our typical first thought is preparation for initial career. We're missing an opportunity to capture potential teachers in the growing group of career switchers, those that later decide to become a teacher, as well as those with degrees in other areas who later consider teaching. How can we create career pathways for staff already in the system that want to become a certified teacher? How can we structure certification options to prepare career switchers more readily from other fields to enter the classroom? Again, there are innovative efforts in preparation programs. I am proud of the historical commitment OSEP has made in supporting training programs. Over the past few years, we have focused on interdisciplinary preparation programs, combining disciplines to meet the changing and challenging needs of schools and students. For example, Western Carolina has a program preparing special educators and speech and language pathologists to work with students with autism by engaging families in the training. San Diego State has an interdisciplinary program training counselors, social workers, and school psychologists in trauma-informed practices and certifying them as court-appointed special advocates. The University of Illinois is preparing special educators and social workers to work with adjudicated youth. There are also innovative practices across states. Louisiana Special Education Fellows Program is a year-long development program for novice special educators to receive further training and coaching. Teach Live at the University of Central Florida with Lisa Deeker, who joined us yesterday, provides a mixed reality classroom with simulated students, allowing teachers to practice pre-service skills. San Diego State offers financial and program support to underrepresented students pursuing certification as special educators or school psychologists. An example of professional organizations supporting this effort is the Council of Exceptional Children's updated set of professional preparation standards for special education, and a new set of standards for early intervention, early childhood, and special education. These standards directly inform teacher preparation as they are used to guide curriculum development and for purposes of program review for recognition and accreditation. There are many efforts across the country within our traditional university programs and within school districts, professional organizations, community colleges. Today, our panelists will describe some of these practices, and we have collected other examples on the OSEP Ideas That Work website, Attract, Prepare, and Retain page. With the information shared today, we can work to expand these pockets of excellence into more wide-scale implementation, reconceptualizing not only how traditional colleges and universities program prepare and credential traditional candidates, but also how these programs can partner with schools and community colleges, how they can adjust and enhance preparation and credentialing to better meet the needs of those choosing education as a second career. Now, I would like to introduce our first presenter. Dr. Aaron Magon is the Director of Research for the National Association of School Nurses, where she's responsible for several national research initiatives that target increasing the capacity and knowledge of school nurses. She's also an adjunct professor at Georgetown University, co-leads a global school nurse research consortium, and has provided a health consultation internationally. Aaron is going to share with us how the training of nurses has evolved to better meet the changing needs of nursing candidates and the changing expectations and settings of where nurses work. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Lori. I am thrilled to be here this afternoon to share experiences from nursing education that might apply and be helpful in education as well. Nursing is considered, Florence Nightingale called it the art and science of nursing, and I think those two perspectives are really important as we think of education in nursing, and so I'm going to talk about a little bit of both, and particularly things that have changed over the past 10 years that I think have really changed how we do nursing education. To begin with, I wanted to talk about every few years, we've always had a scope and standards of nursing practice that was updated, that's overseen by our professional organization, the American Nurses Association. That was more for practicing nurses. Starting in about 2008, although I'm sure it probably was done before, but there was a real concentrated effort. In 2008, the Institute of Medicine, they had several reports, and one of them spoke about healthcare in general and called out the need for improved nursing education. From that report, the Future of Nursing report, which the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation approached the Institute of Medicine and talked to them about doing a 2-year study to really see what was needed in nursing to improve the practice of nursing as it relates to advances in healthcare. 4 different recommendations came from that report, and 2 of them directly relate to education, which is why I'm sharing this, because I think it really did help impact the direction of nursing education. One spoke to the importance of nurses working to their full scope of education and practice. The second one was actually specifically regarding education and a need for an improved educational system that promotes seamless academic progression. From that Future of Nursing report, which by the way, they're doing another one since it's been 10 years, they brought many experts together. They had many town halls. They really focused on what were the needs of patients or people that needed nursing care, as well as the state of science. And they developed this report with specific recommendations and actually funded for various projects to be looked at to try and further education. At the same time, the American Association of Colleges of Nursing developed what they call the essentials of nursing practice. This is focused specifically on nursing education, and the two groups had some overlaps so that they complemented each other. These essentials are what guide what is taught in the nursing programs, and is also linked to how programs are accredited or how that training is done. In that report, which again is also being redone to be updated, they've brought a lot of experts together and identified some new skills because we have more evidence regarding what makes someone healthy or sick, more technology that's available. There are fields of nursing that didn't exist even 10 years ago, and we know there's going to be many more that don't exist currently. These types of reports really have impacted how nursing education is taught and provided new ideas and really provided and fostered a culture of innovation. The next area I would like to talk about that was influenced by these reports is regarding the use of simulation. Now, we've used simulation for many years in nursing, but I think it's really elevated and amped up in the past 10 years, partly because of these reports and partly because technology has opened up opportunities we've never had. The slide shown here is just a few of the examples of how simulation is used in nursing. Every school does it a little differently. I will say that it can be expensive and it has to really have a commitment, but there are many, many positive factors of using simulation. And that could be, for example, using the mannequins, as you can see in a few of the pictures. It's always nice to practice procedures, particularly life-threatening ones, such as the middle picture, on not a live person, so that you can learn the techniques and make sure there's not the pressure that you might actually hurt someone. There's also even more so now, more of avatars and gaming aspects of it, which you can see on the right-hand side, as well as the picture on the bottom. And this is really nice too. I work in public health nursing, so I'm not a hospital nurse. And the labs began mostly as hospital nursing, which is the more traditional role. But as roles of nursing go to in the community and are much more diverse, we needed simulations that showed the diversity of it. So being able to do this, not shown here, some nursing schools actually have rooms that are set up like homes so that they can practice doing home visits. There's community ones like the avatar on the left hand or on the bottom there. Lots of different ways. The important thing is just to provide nursing students the opportunities to practice skills before they're actually with the patients. This is also really important when we're trying to teach because we can make sure that it's a standard assessment for all students. We can have the same exact thing happen, and it helps the instructors who can be observing or watching later see where maybe the student is struggling or where a different skill or decision might be better, and it helps the student learn and understand better in a way we were never able to do, and of course you'd never want to do in front of a real person where there might be issues involved and it's not a standardized set. So simulation has made a world of difference. It also helps students get hands-on experience a lot quicker and increases their confidence. Speaking of hands-on care, I think that's another thing that in the reports, it really called out the importance of as early as possible, and every nursing program is different, it is not the same, but just this idea of trying to get that hands-on care earlier. Because nursing is an art and a science, we need that science base, but the art of interacting with others is critically important as well. And so we need to provide opportunities for nursing students to do that and to have confidence in doing so. Another area in nursing education that I think has really helped us is in regards to academic practice partnerships. Now, again, we've had these in the past, but it's at a different level now. And these partnerships are opportunities that are a win-win for the academic institution as well as the practice location, which is not always just hospitals. Again, as nursing education and nursing opportunities are more in the community, in schools, in many practice settings, having opportunities for nurses, students to observe and to get practice before they graduate is really important. Along with this is an increased emphasis of interdisciplinary education. In the past, nursing was done by nurses. We worked with fellow nursing students, but we realized in the healthcare setting that there's many, many disciplines, and in health, as would be in education, it's much more complex. We know more about the people that we work with. And so being able to provide this interdisciplinary activities to better understand how other disciplines do educate, where they're coming from, even terms that they use that might mean something different in nursing, has been invaluable and has been a real emphasis in nursing education to better prepare nurses, no matter where they work, to be able to work with disciplines different than nursing and to know how to approach those and how to have team efforts. Another area that has been a real positive when it talks about hands-on care is that a lot of nursing education programs end with a capstone or a preceptorship. It's called different things, but it's the idea of in your senior final year before you graduate, really having a concentrated effort. Now, if nursing students know the area where they think they might want to go into, oftentimes instructors will try and get them in a location that would be that area or that subspecialty. If not, it might be a more general one. But it's an opportunity where you're assigned one nurse, usually, sometimes two, and you work their shifts with them. So you work the whole time, where oftentimes before that, it was just a short amount of time that you were working on your clinical day. Working these shifts along with your nursing mentor or preceptor really is that hands-on care that helps the nursing students gain confidence and experience for when they're going to be on their own. I also want to mention something else that has been helpful that I believe was called out in these reports, but the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, from their Health Resources and Services Administration, or HRSA, oftentimes will do training grants. When they identify a particular population, usually they're a vulnerable population, such as rural or a specific minority group, or like I say, any vulnerable population, where there's additional funding to help universities and academic practice partnerships provide training for the nursing students and the nurses in the area to better meet the needs of that area. I think that really helps, especially as we learn more and understand the complexities of care. Going back, I just want to say that one of the things that the reports, both the Future of Nursing and Essentials, talk about is before maybe it was more just that physical care we think of with nursing, but we realize and evidence shows that social needs, behavior, where someone lives, all these things impact someone's health. I'm guessing it's probably the same in education too. And as nurses, we need to be A, aware of it, but B, we need to actually address those. And how to address those is something that has been part of our education now. And I think it's going to increase, as well as better understanding and using technology to relate with our patients. Another area, so we have a national test, and that's kind of like the level setting for a registered nurse. But within that, states can have different other requirements to actually get your license. But this level setting of the test, which has been in existence for a really long time, is also one more tool in addition to the essentials, in addition to the future of nursing, in addition to these other things, to really provide guidance to training programs to know and highlight what's important for a nurse to know. Another aha that came out is that oftentimes in the past, nursing educators, meaning faculty at universities, are experts in their area. For example, I am an expert in public health nursing. My expertise in my PhD is in research related to school nursing and public health nursing. That's great, except that's not necessarily the skill that's always needed for nursing education. There are certain skills, as you all know, in the pedagogy of teaching, and you can be an expert in something but not necessarily be able to teach it well or know how to assess it well. So there's been an increased emphasis at a graduate level of nursing faculty. You can actually get a certification or a specialization in nursing education, and or you can, there are classes and an increased emphasis of how important how things are taught, not just being an expert in the field. I think that has really helped because we look at how we assess students, how we share experiences differently in ways to make sure that they are learning, not just that we're the sage on the stage sharing our expertise. There have been some role changes, and the entry point in particular there's been, and I will admit there are differing opinions on what should be the entry level for nursing. In the world that I work in, and the American Association of Colleges of Nursing indicate it should be a baccalaureate degree. When there was nursing shortages, there was some associate degrees and other degree programs out there that you were able to also get a registered nursing license. It worked well in that particular practice setting, but as time has gone on, if they want to switch settings, or also just the complexity of patients have changed. And so some of those programs, there's concern that they might not really provide the education and preparation needed. In fact, there has been research that shows that increased education is linked to less patient mortality. So when we look at our outcomes, which is not just health, but safety of our patients, that's something we really look into. That being said, there has been an increase in the number of graduate programs in nursing, and not just for a leadership or an administration role, but frontline nurses or specialty nurses, being experts really in an area. Again, instead it used to be, well, if you did it a lot, then you're an expert. Now we have new experiences. There are certification programs online, many more opportunities for getting additional certifications or credentials that increase opportunities for nursing and make them true experts in the area. I think a final thing I would like to talk about is also in this transitioning from preparing nurses to being the frontline nurse working on their own, is that many, particularly in hospitals, although also again it's branching out to other community settings where nurses work, is providing a residency program where again there's a mentor and there's learning opportunities and maybe a group or a cohort of several nurses working that are new, coming together weekly to share and to reflect on what they're learning, to ask questions in a safe setting that helps provide them with the confidence and the expertise they need to be able to work as a true expert in nursing. I think that mentorship and those additional trainings, oftentimes there's online trainings they'll do in addition to working on the floor or their setting, are just different ways that really help the nurses gain the experience for them to really provide the care that's needed in the complex world of healthcare for which nurses work. I think these are the opportunities that hopefully are helpful for you during this summit to reflect and think on what might be of help in the world of education as well. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Aaron. Definitely some lessons learned we can apply to teacher preparation. Now I'd like to welcome our panel. Kathy Key is a professor of special education in the Department of Education Preparation at North Carolina A&T State University. Dr. Key's research interest and engagement focuses on the intersection between general education, special education, and multicultural education. Naomi Andrasek is a senior researcher and policy advisor for the Learning Policy Institute. She works to advance evidence-based policy across a wide range of issue areas, including whole child education and educator quality, and is the lead author of California's Special Education Teacher Shortage. Robert Pianta is the Dean of the University of Virginia School of Education and Human Development, Novartis U.S. Foundation Professor of Education, Professor of Psychology, and founding director of the Center for Advanced Study of Teaching and Learning at the University of Virginia. Their full bios can be found on the OSEP Ideas That Work website. Now I will turn it over to Kathy.
Lori, thank you so much for that introduction. Over the past 30 years, with the support of OSEP funding, I have embarked upon a journey to produce culturally responsive, exceptional educators for diversity. And briefly, I would like to share 10 lessons learned. The first lesson is repositioning. Reposition culture at the center of all educator preparation programs. Second, take a deep dive. Restructure programs revise curriculums, integrate culturally responsive principles to guide and frame the implementation of CRT throughout the educator preparation curriculum across all programs, inclusive of field-based experiences and clinical internships. Third, focus on developing the pre-service candidate's understanding of culture and how it manifests in their planning, in their instruction, and their classroom environment. Fourth, provide intentional professional development for pre-service candidates, including a certificate such that they can cite this accomplishment on their resume and have when they go for job interviews. Fifth, offer intensive and varied field-based experiences in diverse communities, including community engagement through our school partnerships and extended practices and internships. Those should be in rural, urban settings, and settings whereby our pre-service candidate is a minority. 6, create cross-cultural immersion opportunities and experiences. We currently have a rural urban exchange program with one of our PWIs in the western part of the state. It gives our candidates an opportunity to see what rural America is like, where the majority of the students are Caucasian. It also gives our candidates an opportunity to see the lived experiences and teaching of our indigenous people on the Cherokee Reservation. And we have had an opportunity to take our students out of the country, study abroad programs in Belize, Dominican, and Costa Rica. Very enlightening. 7, provide family engagement, learning, and lived experiences with families. Again, we believe in showing how, the show me and the do it stage of their career. So we actually have our candidates to call parents for those parent phone calls. We actually bring in parents from all walks of life, diversity, SES, sexual orientation, for them to conduct parent conferences. And we have our candidates to host a parent night whereby they are making materials and teaching parents how to teach their children literacy skills and mathematical skills. In addition, our newest program is our Houston EL Home Stay Program, where we take our pre-service candidates to Houston, who, by the way, is a North Carolina A&T alumnus, to live in the homes of teachers, principals, who are from a different racial and ethnic background of our candidates. They also are immersed in the Latinx population and culture. And we have a study abroad program in Belize where we vet families, and our students are able to live with families who have no running water or transportation. Very enlightening for their cultural growth and development. Number 8, prepare pre-service candidates to be advocates, teacher leaders, and agents of change in social justice. Many of our candidates have, yes, received the Outstanding Student Teacher Award, but they have become the Rookie Teacher of the Month, of the year, and they are now serving on school and state board programs and representatives. Number 9, develop a structured induction program for graduates, inclusive of on-site visitation, during the first 3 years after graduation for our pre-service candidates. Why? It helps and promotes retention in the field. We believe that we should keep in constant contact, invite those graduates back to present in our classes, invite those graduates to present with us at conferences. And just recently, we began our Teacher Grant Award. Our candidates can complete an application for up to $1,000 to be used to attend a conference, a training, national board certification, and or to support material acquisition for their classrooms. These things are very much needed during the first years of teaching. Mentorship is the last area. And I would say that mentorship is a lifelong journey. Mentorship begins on the first day that your pre-service candidate enters your doors. We at North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University want our graduates to know the name, to know the face, to know the story of the students and families in the diverse communities that they serve. When we think about our graduates and our goal, we want them to be innovative, to think out of the box. We want them to be able to walk amongst the people, to understand the communities that the students live in, that they make home visits, that they sit down and interview parents about the strengths, the concerns, the hopes and dreams of their children. Our candidate, in turn, we hope, will walk amongst the people in the neighborhoods with the students to learn their likes, dislikes, and interests, and use that in the teaching and learning process. So when we walk away from it all and we think about how we define culturally responsive educators, I'd like to say that culturally responsive pedagogy is a method of teaching and learning that builds on the values and the cultural experiences of all the participants. In short, my operationalized definition of culturally responsive pedagogy is when the curriculum, the lesson plans, the classroom environment reflects and relates the student's culture, their home community life, their lived experiences, their interests into the teaching and learning process. It brings the elements of the student's culture into the classroom to provide a better rationale for student engagement. Culturally responsive strategies connect the home, the school, and the community environments. Thank you.
Kathy, thank you for that great perspective. Really appreciate the information. My first question for you is, what advice would you give to other preparation programs to help reconceptualize preparing culturally competent teachers and increase the pipeline of diverse teachers from diverse communities?
There are several areas of advice that I would share with other educator preparation programs as they begin to reconceptualize how to best prepare their candidates for cultural diversity and the change and shift in populations today. First, we need to go to the neighborhoods themselves. Now, what do I mean by that? Our critical friends in our communities, our school partners, what is it that they see that our candidates and future candidates need in order to do the job? Take that information. We also need to draw upon our recent graduates, 5, 3, and 1 year out of our program and ask, where did we fall short? What skills do you need to better prepare yourself such that our future candidates will not go through the stumbling blocks that you did once you left us? When I think about recruiting, preparing, and retaining teachers of color, it's a hard job because, as we know, education still is not that career that is first examined. Although for teachers of color, it was and has been for years our oldest profession.
Mhm.
I think we need to employ upon them the fact that they can be influencers. Influencers as warm demanders with high expectations. The average student today going through school K-12 may experience 1 or 2 teachers of color and perhaps no males of color in their schooling. And so we do need to share with them how important they are. Because as one of our panelists said earlier, their presence brings about a level of motivation for completing high school. Their presence brings out the motivation for going to college. Teachers of color have walked the walk themselves, while we come from a full gamut on the SES scale, classism as well. We are influencers in many ways. Teachers of color do need support, financial support to enter and complete their matriculation, whether it's at the pre-service level, whether we're talking about master's programs, they still need financial support. And mentorship is critical, whether it's a teacher in the school, whether we embark upon utilizing some of our natural networks, those teachers who are out in the community, who have retired, who can support and mentor those newbies. It is critical.
Thank you, Kathy, for that information. You talked a little bit about natural networks. So what are some ways we can foster stronger partnerships in our preparation programs to make sure that we are having a pipeline of diverse educators?
You know, I don't think we utilize our alumni in the ways that we could. They are more than happy to serve as mentors. They're more than happy to share teaching strategies, how to work in diverse communities. Many of our alumni are products of the communities in which they taught for years. They can serve as cultural brokers, cultural liaisons. They can serve as friends of our colleges of education to give us insight how to make entree into those communities and build those school partnerships.
So thank you, Kathy, for sharing that information. Very important topic for our field today. At this time, I'd like to invite Naomi to join us.
Thank you, Lori, for that introduction. I'm going to use my few minutes to touch on something that Kathy also mentioned, which is the relationship between a lot of the preparation practices that she discussed and retention. I'm going to dive into that a little bit more deeply and talk about the connections between teacher preparation and teacher shortages. And what I'm hoping that listeners will take away today is that high quality teacher preparation is critical, not only for resolving teacher shortages, but also for improving student outcomes. We'll start off using California as a brief example of what special educator shortages look like. And after that, I'll touch on a more nationally representative research base that can help us understand why special educators leave and what can be done about it. So when we looked at the past several years of teacher credentialing data for California, what we found was that the special educator shortage in this state is both severe and growing. So if you look at 2017-18, what you see there is that nearly 2/3 of incoming special educators entered the field underprepared, which means that they came in without having completed, or in some cases having even started, a teacher prep program. That means that some of the most vulnerable students are being taught by some of the least prepared teachers. So that all speaks to the level of demand for special educators in California. It also raises the question of what drives teacher demand. We found that attrition from the field drives the bulk of demand for teachers. It accounts for nearly 90% of annual demand across shortage areas. So we have to ask what factors are driving special educators out of the field, and what are some strategies that we can use to address these issues. I think to help us think about what the research says on this topic and how it relates to teacher preparation, I'm going to talk about 3 buckets: financial support, collaborative working conditions, and then the design of educator prep programs. So in that first bucket, financial support, special educators nationally have cited wanting or needing a higher salary as a reason for leaving the field. Research also shows that student debt can drive people away from teaching careers, and that students of color bear higher levels of student debt. So the key takeaway there is that if we want more people to even set foot in teacher prep programs, and if we want to increase teacher diversity, then we have to think about ways to mitigate the student debt burden. Strategies like teacher scholarships and loan forgiveness are both evidence-based ways for recruiting people, including candidates of color, into teaching careers. There are also strategies for retaining teachers because they usually come with an obligation to teach for 4 or so years in a high-need subject after candidates earn their credential. So that was the first bucket. The second bucket, collaborative working conditions. On that, research shows that receiving support from general education colleagues and administrators impacts special educators' decisions to remain in the field. Special ed teachers will often say that their gen ed colleagues don't have enough grounding in special education to be able to support them or collaborate with them effectively. So in terms of strategies, I think one example here is what California has done. The state recently took steps to help mitigate the issue through a revision of the teaching performance expectations, which help shape teacher prep in the state. The revised expectations established a common grounding of knowledge that both candidates in gen ed and special ed teacher prep programs have to learn. I think the key takeaway here is that special ed and gen ed teachers can operate in practice silos. And if we want special educators to stay in the field, and if we want to improve outcomes for students, we have to also look at what preparation looks like for gen ed teachers. So those are the first 2 buckets. The last bucket is features of ed prep programs that can support retention. Research shows that preparation matters. In California, underprepared teachers leave at about twice the rate of those who are fully prepared. And that often means that they're leaving before they've had a chance to gain experience and become more effective. In contrast, better prepared teachers are more effective, they're more likely to stay longer, and they're associated with greater gains in student achievement. And special education specifically, preparation and experience are associated with greater gains in reading and math for students with disabilities. And generally speaking, the research points to several features of ed prep programs that can help support not only retention, but also teacher effectiveness. These include things like ensuring that candidates have opportunities to take extensive coursework in teaching methods and student learning, ensuring that candidates have access to clinically rich preparation experiences that give them the opportunity to practice teaching and then to synthesize and apply what they're learning through their coursework. And then also that they get opportunities to practice teaching and receive real-time feedback under the mentorship of an expert teacher. In terms of strategies, one thing I'd lift up here are teacher residencies, because they embed all of those features, and they also often come with financial supports for candidates and an obligation to continue teaching in their district after they've completed their program. So there's also a strong retention incentive there. So in closing, and to come full circle back to where we started, again, high quality teacher preparation is critical, not only for resolving teacher shortages, but also for improving outcomes for students with disabilities. So thank you.
Naomi, you talked about the research on high quality teacher preparation. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how high quality teacher preparation impacts student outcomes?
Sure. So, well-prepared teachers serve students more effectively in a couple of ways. First, they're more effective even in their first year of teaching. Well-prepared special ed teachers in particular are better able to use a range of instructional methods and handle other important teaching duties like assessing students and selecting curricular materials. The other way that well-prepared teachers serve students is just that they're more likely to stay. Studies of the relationship between teacher prep and teacher turnover suggest that teachers who have little to no pedagogical preparation are 2 to 3 times more likely to leave the profession than those with more comprehensive preparation. And I'm talking about things like student teaching, getting formal feedback on their teaching, being able to take multiple courses in teaching and student learning. So, the other point I'll make there is that, although all teachers grow in their first few years in effectiveness, underprepared teachers, again, are more likely to leave within their first 3 years. So they're coming in and they're exiting the field before they've had a chance to really, truly become effective teachers. And so that's one way that making sure that candidates get full comprehensive preparation can also serve students more effectively.
Thank you, Naomi. It's really important for us to be able to understand how preparation can impact student outcomes. So my next question for you is, what role does preparation of general education teachers play in effectively serving students with disabilities?
Yeah, so I'd say a couple of things there as well. So, ensuring general education teachers have grounding in special education can ensure that they can effectively collaborate with their special ed colleagues, which in turn, as I touched on earlier, can support their retention. And that in and of itself is important for improving outcomes for students with disabilities. It can also, ensuring that gen ed teachers have grounding in special education can also help ensure that they're prepared to use effective inclusive practices and to teach the students with disabilities who are in their classrooms. I think if we want to continue advancing the inclusion of students with disabilities, we have to look to prep not only for special ed teachers, but to prep for gen ed teachers as well. Yeah, I apologize. I'm having a little difficulty with my camera. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off, but I'll stay on audio.
Thank you, Naomi, for sharing those great responses. At this time, I'd like to ask Bob to join us.
Thank you, Lori, for that introduction and for this opportunity. And I also just want to comment and appreciate the comments made by both Kathy and Naomi, and express my agreement with those points that they made. So I'm going to reflect a little bit on what I believe are the responsibilities of teacher preparation programs, particularly in terms of producing graduates that really do have an impact on the students that they teach in the field, and producing those graduates in a way that we can be accountable for their skills and competencies as they enter the field. And I'm going to do that in part by reflecting on what I think are some moves and innovations we've made here in our teacher preparation program at the School of Education and Human Development at the University of Virginia. And these experiences that I'm going to describe really span all elements of our program, from early childhood to secondary, from teaching literacy to teaching math, and from teaching special education to our general education programs. So I'll try to draw on these in a way that I think can be illustrative for what I believe teacher preparation can accomplish in its in the role that that higher education can have. So fundamentally, we just have a very, very strong emphasis on practice. I think that's the starting point for us. We start our program, is fundamentally designed around producing effective practitioners. So we start with familiarizing our students with knowledge on effective practice, and we introduce them to and slowly deepen their familiarity with a set of validated frameworks for describing and observing effective practice. In one instance, this includes the classroom assessment scoring system that I've done some work on over the years, and as well as others that are my colleagues in special education and general education have used. We thread this framework for effective practice into all of our methods courses, in many of our content instruction courses, and into our students' fieldwork, so that students know the kind of practices and the definition of effective practice that'll be the focus of their fieldwork, and they know how to, for example, take a math lesson and teach it in a way that that emulates these definitions of effective practice. Our candidates have numerous and repeated instances of observing and discussing elements of effective and ineffective practice using these frameworks by observing other teachers, in video libraries, and in their own practice through the coaching and supervision experiences they get, again, from the beginning of their training all the way out through the culmination of student teaching. So this framework for practice is, as I said, it's comprehensive in the sense that it can span all of these age and grade levels and content areas, and is supplemented by specialized definitions of practice that work for example, special education programs. In the end, though, I think the power of this framework for effective practice is that it makes practice very explicit, and it creates a common language and lens across the entire program. So our candidates get immersed in a very consistent and coherent experience that anchors all elements of training and preparation. And in the end, this coherence, both for students and faculty, I think is a real strength and an advantage of our students' experience here. We've also innovated quite a bit in the use of technology to provide our candidates with more and more standardized opportunities to build skills. So, I think most of us in higher education recognize that we're utterly dependent on the field experiences and placements that we can obtain for our students to gain skills, in that those field experiences can only do so much in terms of providing students opportunities for repeated and frequent practice and feedback on key skills. So we've used simulation as a tool for providing our candidates with more frequent and more frequent opportunities for practice and feedback. Their simulation experiences, again, are threaded through methods courses and through content area coursework. We've been using the immersion-based technology, and we've used that to focus on what we see are 3 essential skills for beginning teachers. Classroom management, it's the thing that teachers and principals talk about the most. Instructional feedback and providing good and rich instructional feedback to students, and parent engagement. So our candidates work in the simulator and receive immediate feedback and opportunities to repeat their prior engagement and responses to students. And the research that we've been conducting with our students in the simulator is showing that this experience is quite effective for improving their practice and for reducing their stress and cognitive load. So all in all, we kind of strive here to build what we're proud of as a coherent, programmatic experience that's focused on gradual building of knowledge and skill in the practice of effective teaching, drawing heavily from the scientific literature on effective teaching and using a common measurement tool for identifying effective and ineffective teaching that threads throughout all of students' experiences here. We do this in the context of an emphasis on continual improvement and data-driven adjustments that the faculty make overall. I think this focus on essential early career skills, this highly programmatic and focused approaches to building those skills, this emphasis on coherence and an organized approach to the programmatic experience that students are having, as it builds through increasingly challenging and diverse settings for practice, is an emphasis, I think, that is providing students a very rich and data-driven experience, and in the end allows us as an institute of higher education to stand up evidence and data about our candidates' experiences as they move into the field. I think this last point is pretty important because the field is, I think, slowly evolving and may evolve much more rapidly in the next several years. And I think IHEs have a great role, a potential leadership role in this evolution as we see emerging differences in the way that we can do alternatives to the way we can do credentialing. So we see this movement toward competency-focused certification, micro-credentials, stackable credentials that students can go through modularized experiences, whether around knowledge or practice, and build toward a certification or a license to go out and practice in the field that tracks back into identifiable skills that have been acquired and demonstrated along the way. I think this is a move that higher education, again, as I said, could play a real leadership role in. And as we evolve away from the 3-credit course or the 6-credit practicum or the number of hours in the field and focus more on competencies and the kind of disaggregation of or modularization of the resources that we deploy to produce those competencies, I think this is a really important evolution in the field and a way for teacher preparation to really be a leader in the field among many of the professions that are involved. Let me pivot for a moment because I think those reflections on teacher preparation come, obviously from experience here with my colleagues in our program, but also track into some of the observations we've seen from our work in the field in early childhood, which is my area of research. And I think, we walk away from the work that we've done in early childhood teacher preparation and in effective teaching in early childhood in many ways that reflect what I just said about teacher preparation more generally and sort of pivot it in a more specialized way that I think has relevance both for a regular or for general and special education. I think there are really 3 key takeaways here, or essential elements that we take away from. The first is I can't underestimate, and this is from our work, surveys that we've done with many teachers. I can't underestimate the need for increasing teachers' knowledge of contemporary child development. Our evidence, as others, shows that most teachers' knowledge of child development is quite limited and is woefully outdated. The average teacher candidate takes 1 course in child development, and over the last decade, our knowledge of child and adolescent development has just exploded. And unfortunately, most of that contemporary knowledge is not being transmitted to our teachers. So surveys that we've done in early childhood show that the reference point for most teachers' knowledge of child development is either Piaget or Skinner. These are really outdated, and most are not familiar with recent knowledge on language and cognitive development. We see this in the debates about the need for the science of reading being part of teacher preparation. They're less familiar with attachment theory and theories of social relationships, or even knowledge about trajectories of reading or math development. So this knowledge about child and adolescent, when it's up to date and sensitive to how contexts shape development, really forms the basis for teachers' decision making and interactions with kids. And their knowledge of typical development and atypical development help shape the most effective ways to respond to children's individual differences and cues and learning needs. So that's the first area, knowledge of child development. The second is, I think I've already emphasized, the learning and development of young children and children with special needs are just highly dependent on and even inseparable from the qualities of their context and particularly features of their interactions with teachers. This is fundamentally Vygotskian, this notion of a zone of proximal development, and that teachers of young children know and recognize in that zone in which teachers know and recognize the children's developmental capabilities, and then begin to understand the next steps on a learning trajectory. And when they can engage children sensitively and effectively in tasks that expand their knowledge and skill along that path, whether it's language or social, emotional development or math. To do this well, teachers need a framework for understanding, recognizing, and improving their interactions so that they can be more intentional and effective in using that medium as a resource for children's learning and development. I think our experience with using the tool, the classroom assessment scoring system, and the professional development that's been aligned around that tool has shown the value for improving teachers' practice that is gained from having this lens for labeling and identifying effective and ineffective practice, and for understanding one's own role in encouraging students' engagement. These tools, I think have really been shown in many studies now to help build a classroom's capacity for fostering student learning. So this idea of a tool that helps gauge practice and then professional development aligned with the definition of practice that's used by that tool is really kind of essential. And the third thing I would emphasize is that I think most early childhood and special ed programs, is really the case for younger kids, have too little emphasis on a programmatic approach to learning, and really are lacking depth and breadth in curriculum. We see way too many examples in our research, and this is validated by others, of kind of an improvisational approach to teaching, where teachers are kind of left on their own by school districts and states to have to select and decide about the learning activities that they're going to deploy on any given day, or sometimes on any given hour, and with any given kid or group of kids. And we certainly need to recognize the need for teachers to individualize, but individualizing from a common framework, a scope and sequence, a developmental path or trajectory that has defined for teachers some elements of instruction and instructional activities is really a way of individualizing from a base that I think can be far more productive and helpful. Right now, an awful lot of what we see in our research, and others have validated this, is that for many teachers, the internet and actually Pinterest is identified as one of the prime sources of their instructional activities that they're delivering to kids on any given day. So this third element that I will just call out its importance is the element of curriculum, and being serious about building that in a robust way and selecting from what's available as effective curriculum is really important. And IHEs have a real important role in all of this. They have a real important role in teaching contemporary child development. They have an extraordinarily important role in helping build familiarity with and around effective practice and frameworks for assessing effective practice. And they have a real important role in helping our teacher candidates learn about what the most contemporary and proven effective curriculum are, and how to implement them well in the classrooms in which they teach. Thanks.
Bob, what innovations in teacher preparation have the strongest evidence for impact that we should see more widely implemented in teacher preparation across the country?
So I think the most important innovations that we have in teacher prep, and I think there's a class of them that I would just I would call out, which is essentially almost any innovation where we are identifying in our implementation of that innovation an impact of that on actual behavior that our teacher candidates display. Okay, so we've seen movements over the course of the last couple of years in terms of increasing the use of targeted coaching in our teachers' experiences in student teaching, for example, where they're coached around a particular behavior or a set of targeted behaviors as they implement a lesson. That is an innovation in the sense of being more formalized and more focused and more targeted. We're seeing even more innovation in the use of technology around in this broader class of practice-focused of interventions. I think I mentioned this earlier, the use of simulation. So I think the more we in higher education begin to think of ourselves as becoming much more intentional around the production of competencies, behavioral competencies, where we have defined those competencies and then we have essentially identified numerous opportunities where our actions as the program are producing those competencies in various, emergent forms to a level of competency that we feel comfortable then allows us to exit the teacher into the real classroom. I think that in and of itself is an extraordinarily important push and kind of broader set of innovations. As I said, our use of simulation is really a way to think about, we're trying to train people in very complicated skills, classroom management, for example. It's a very complicated skill, and right now, we are less intentional about giving teachers frequent opportunities for practice of those skills, repeated practice of those skills, repeated feedback on those skills, as we might otherwise be. And simulation allows us an opportunity to actually do that in a much more standardized and kind of rigorous fashion. And so our experience has been that the use in our case of immersion, but there are other simulation tools, that are available, and I think this is going to be a growing class of tools more broadly. Has enabled us, for example, to be able to deal with teachers' implicit bias. So it's not just around classroom management skills per se, but around how bias might introduce itself into those skills. Where in the case of our implementation of this, the race or ethnicity or language background of avatars can be shifted in ways that elicit bias in a context where our teacher candidates who might not otherwise admit to being biased or having bias enter into their differential responses to kids may begin to feel that activated for themselves and begin to or see it in their behavior. So it makes the implicit more explicit and allows us then to kind of neutralize the emotions that may track with that, and provide teachers with solutions and feedback that allow them to behave more effectively. So I would just say this broader set of innovations around actual interventions that produce demonstrable impacts on practice is absolutely the direction that I think the field is going to need to go in. More broadly, as we ourselves become accountable for the impact that we have on the teacher workforce, and it just makes professional preparation more effective.
Bob, I wish we had more time for you to be able to share your expertise with us today, but unfortunately we don't. So I'm going to be able to ask you one more question. Given the role of IHEs as the predominant source of credentialing teachers, what emerging trends can IHEs look at to better meet current shortages?
I think the best thing we can do to address shortage is embrace the movement toward micro-credentials and competency-based certifications. So for example, in that context, to partner with alternative programs, to partner with grow your own programs, to partner with community colleges. We need to move ourselves away from the notion that it has to take a 4-year degree that's composed, or a 5-year degree, or a 2-year degree that's composed of stackable 3-credit courses or practicum experiences, and look underneath that to say, what are the key competencies that are required for teachers to be effective when they move into the field? Let's assess those competencies for our candidates, and let's not train competencies that candidates already have, but allow them to move into newer areas of development and increase their competency, so that at the end of the day, they can more efficiently and effectively move through a training program that enables them to get in the field perhaps more quickly. I think this helps kind of open up the pool for applicants that we can accept into our program to a much broader group that coming from many other sources other than your typical sources, and allows us to focus on the essential skills they need in order to be effective when they move in. It also enables us to be flexible as programs in tailoring our approaches to instruction or to competency development to the individual needs and profiles of candidates from a much wider range and more diverse backgrounds. So I think this general movement in the professional preparation more broadly, and we see this in other professions as well, toward competency-based certifications that are produced as a function of accruing stackable micro-credentials with demonstrable knowledge and skill that travel with those credentials is really the way forward, and can enable us to be far more flexible, far more individualized, far more tailored in our offerings to potential folks that are interested in becoming a teacher, and I think has a real implication for helping us address both the teacher shortage more generally, but the need for a far more diverse workforce ultimately.
So thank you, Bob. You really piqued my interest around the topic of micro-credentialing. So I will be following up with you to have a little bit more conversation with you. But at this time, I would like to invite Kathy and Naomi to join us for our continued conversation. It appears that maybe Naomi is still having a little bit of technical difficulties, so hopefully she will be able to join us audio. Thank you for all of your remarks. We have a couple of questions that we would like to discuss with all of you, so just feel free to jump in as I ask the question. So the very first question I'd like to hear from you is, are teacher preparation programs keeping up with the changing population of future teachers and the changing skills that they require? If yes, how? And if no, what are some things that we need to do a little bit differently? So anyone would like to start?
Lori, this is Kathy.
Yes.
I think we are doing a good job, but there is room for growth. When we take a look at the State of the Special Education Profession Report 2019, we found that many of our teachers identified 3 areas where they really needed more preparation. And those 3 areas were needing to know and understand how to implement and utilize culturally responsive practices,
Right.
using strengths-based or asset-based approaches, and how to work with students and families whose demographics, racial and ethnic identity, language backgrounds, and socioeconomic status differs from theirs. When I think back to the 2008 article written by Trent Key and O, How Far Have We Come with Diversity in Preparing Our Pre-Service Educators, our general educators were doing a much better job than our special educators. We have grown, but we still have areas that we need to improve in, particularly in the area of diversity.
You know, I'd agree with Kathy's points on this, and also offer that I just think we are only becoming we're only entering the phase at which we have to do this work with much greater depth and rigor than we have. I think we've moved from a phase of awareness. We all need to have a much more culturally competent workforce. We absolutely have to have more of a workforce that looks more like the students that they are asked to teach. And so we've now become aware of those issues, and each program, in many ways, have started to map a set of activities and progressions to help address those two goals of cultural competency and actual diversification of the workforce. But I think we're a ways from that, and with so many different teacher preparation programs across the country, there's always going to be, some unevenness with respect to those. I think the possibilities of greater partnerships that exist with both school systems and other diverse preparation programs is going to be a really important area for us to focus on. So it's certainly something we have tried to focus on ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think this is Naomi. Just to add on to that, it's something that we've done research on at LPI, the teacher diversity issue, and what I'd point out is the research that shows that teachers of color benefit all students, with students of color, especially Black students, is experiencing boosts in academic achievement, graduation rates, and aspirations to attend college. So those are all strong reasons to focus efforts on increasing teacher diversity so that our teachers coming out of our prep programs more closely reflect the demographics of the students that they're teaching. But, the thing to point out is that, the research shows there are real financial barriers, especially in terms of student debt and the cost of teacher prep programs for recruiting people of color into teaching. So I think in that respect, it's not surprising that teachers of color often begin teaching without having completed comprehensive preparation, coming in instead through alternative routes that may skip student teaching or key coursework while they're trying to learn on the job. So I think that if we want to recruit candidates of color into high quality educator prep programs where they're getting the kinds of coursework and student teaching that support not only their effectiveness and the retention, then we'll have to look at ed prep pathways that are going to hit all of those points. And there are some approaches out there, things like residencies and grow your own approaches that could provide financial supports and themselves in ways that make it possible for a more diverse population of teacher candidates to get into the field.
Absolutely. Financial barriers are one of the major drawbacks for many teachers of color. And so OSEP funding, supporting personnel grants have been a lifesaver. When I take a look at our program, we have been funded since 1992. And increasing that pipeline is critical, not only at the pre-service level, but ensuring that those persons of color move on to many of our PWIs through OSEP grant-funded programs is another insightful, innovative mode. I also want to go back to the statement that Bob made in regards to our awareness level with cultural diversity. And so we are aware. And I always say to persons, while we need to recruit teachers of color, we also need to ensure that everyone who departs our preparation programs is culturally responsive. And that is a tall order. That means that we, faculty, need to examine our knowledge base, our growth processes as well. And I know that UVA is working towards some very different avenues. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy.
Yeah. All right. Good.
Yes.
All right. Well, great comments and great responses. And thank you, Kathy, for calling out our OSEP personnel preparation programs. We're very proud of those. This question, I think, is really relative to what's happening today during the pandemic. So I'm very anxious to hear from you regarding this. So, you know, we've all recently seen that teachers were not as prepared to pivot into the remote instruction or the distance learning instruction, you know, that they were kind of placed into. So how can we better prepare teachers for how schools and education may look in the future? We don't know what that might look like, and we don't know when that might be, when the change will take place. But what are your thoughts on how we need to prepare them for the future?
Well, this is a great question, Lori, and you know, it is the $64 million trillion question, because we don't know what the future is going to look like.
It is.
So I can only
Exactly.
say, it's interesting because our experience with our student teachers last spring was that many of the classrooms where our students were working and the teachers pivoted, the supervisor teachers had to pivot to online instruction. It was our student teachers that were helping train the master teachers in how to deliver instruction online. And I suspect that's probably the case in many instances with the generation of students that we have that are more comfortable in these environments. But honestly, I think we have to be careful not to assume that we think the world ahead of time, the world in the future is going to have a lot of online education delivered by an instructor. In a sense, we have to be careful to not assume that we know what kind of technological innovations are going to be present or accommodations are going to be present, but to try to give our students some depth of immersion in a couple different key technology areas and know where to go to answer questions when the new world emerges. That's kind of our sense of things, like not to take the peanut butter approach to try to train them in everything, but to just have them be proficient in a few things, know the strengths and weaknesses of those, and know where to go when they have questions.
Yeah, great response. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. I concur with Bob. I tell you, in March, we were all like the little red hen, just, not sure what to do. But our teacher candidates who were student teaching were able to assist their clinical educators. Just this morning, prior to this summit, I was viewing live one of our teacher candidates, and just phenomenal, the use of technology. Well, not all of our schools, not all of our students, as we know, have broadband access, nor the hardware, the iPad or the computers. And so it's given them a reality check on what they need to be prepared for. I suspect that remote learning will be around in a different format, i.e., there won't be snow days anymore because you can go to remote learning. But in speaking of preparation, we do need to shore up our end in making sure that our students and candidates have the skill set. I've just been amazed at what they can do because I'm not technology savvy.
Yeah, great. Naomi, I'm going to start us off on this next one. So you guys earlier in your presentations talked about effective practices in preparation. Are some innovative practices that you are interested in seeing implemented a little bit more widely. So can you expound on that a little bit and talk about what those innovative practices should look like?
Sure. I think one innovative practice that isn't yet widespread are the Grow Your Own programs, which can create pathways for students and school staff and sometimes other school community members to help them explore teaching careers and also support their entry and progression through teacher prep. In California, we're seeing these programs pop up locally. So for example, there's a program in Humboldt, California. It's on the North Coast, that recruits new special ed teacher candidates from the district's pool of paraeducators into the district's residency program. And then there are also examples of state-level support for grow your own initiatives. Here we have in California, a couple of years ago, back in 2015-16, there was some money appropriated by the state to the classified school employee teacher credentialing program. And that ended up providing grants to districts to support what ended up being a little over 2,200 classified staff, people like teachers' aides. And that helped them earn a bachelor's degree and a teaching credential. So it got them, almost from the very beginning of their college career through the end of a teaching credential. It recruited people from school communities into the teaching profession. It provided staff with $4,000 per year for up to 5 years, and that could subsidize things that often act as barriers to recruiting candidates of color, things like paying for teacher training costs, tuition fees, books, exam costs. And what we saw is that demand for that program was really high. And actually, now that we have a few years of data on it, we've seen that more than half of the candidates in that program were candidates of color.
Wow. It's interesting that you talked about the Grow Your Own programs, Kathy. Our panel that has been preparing for this also was talking about, for attracting into the profession, the need for the Grow Your Own. So we're looking at Grow Your Own programs, not only for the attraction piece of it, but certainly for the preparation piece of it as well. So Kathy or Bob, anything you'd like to add to the question on the innovative practices?
Well, I would just add, I think we've partnered on this pipeline issue. Our partnerships with community colleges in the area have really been very, very productive for us, and I think again have helped address some of these issues of diversification and the pipeline that are connected to some of these issues. I think the other innovation that we're starting to see, and I'm very interested in seeing how it expands, is the move toward micro-credentialing and professional preparation more broadly. Certainly see it in other sectors, and we've heard other people speak about this from other sectors, and the way that can begin to help drive our programs to focus on key skills and knowledge domains and begin to build certification systems around that. I think it's going to be really a very interesting innovation for the future.
Great. All right. So we just have a little bit of time left. So what I'd like each one of you to do is just take a brief minute to focus in on one critical practice or a tip that you would like to give in regards to effective preparation.
So I guess I would just jump in here and say, I think, and I mean this from observing the work in our program and others, I think the more that we are very clear as teacher preparation professionals about the actual outcomes that we want for our students and can observe and measure those and assess those in very clear metrics and ways, that has kind of a transformative effect on the kind of experiences that the program designs to produce those kind of outcomes. So explicit articulation of those outcomes, to me, seems to be, at least from our experience, has been a real important aspect of our work.
Great.
I would say the need for ongoing preparation in cultural competency, design and delivery, understanding the impact of culture and how culture impacts the way we plan, instruct, and set up our classroom environment. But also, when our candidate leaves us, what will they be able to do? If I were to walk into their classroom 1 year, 2 and 3 years out, will I see evidences of culturally responsiveness and culturally responsive practices?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Naomi,
I think that,
go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing I would add there is mentorship. I think, the research on special education teacher prep shows that mentorship and intensive mentorship received from an expert teacher who also has expertise in special ed is associated with better retention and also better teacher efficacy. So I'd point that out, that that's a key part of preparation for all teachers, but including in special education. And, you know, making sure that we're pursuing strategies that also grow our pool of mentor teachers in special education, because, you know, if we have a shortage of mentors, then that it's going to make it really difficult to pursue that strategy.
Great, great. All right. Well, Kathy and Dean and Naomi, thank you very much for your time today and certainly your expertise. You raised a lot of interest in me on a number of issues that you brought up, and I think it could certainly drive the work that OSEP can help support, as well as in areas of interest that the field can take a look at in changing some of their practices. So again, thank you for being with us today, and you know, your continued support that you're providing to the field is certainly appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for sharing your expertise. And we are fortunate to have you all working to improve our preparation efforts. Now I'd like to introduce our final speaker. Erica Mcrae is Director and Associate Professor at the University of Florida. Dr. Mcrae is currently co-principal investigator of the Cedar Center, our OSEP-funded TA center. Welcome, Erica.
Lori, thank you so much for the invitation to join this esteemed panel of educators and experts. It is my pleasure to join you from sunny Florida to share some insights that I have. And I'd like to first start out by giving you my perspective and the foregrounding of my own experience. I am currently a co-director with the Cedar Center. Cedar, we love our acronyms: Collaboration for Effective Educator Development, Accountability, and Reform. I'm also a professor, an associate professor of special education, and currently the director of the School of Special Education, School Psychology, and Early Childhood Studies at the University of Florida. So I bring all of these lenses to my comments today, as I enjoyed listening to my colleagues from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, the University of Virginia, the Learning Policy Institute, and from our sister field, nursing education. As I said, the Cedar Center is one of my primary roles, and we have been focused for several years now on the systemic nature of the challenges facing improved outcomes for students with disabilities, as well as promising solutions. And it was such a joy to hear my colleagues talk about the ways that they are addressing these issues in their context. Our approach at the Cedar Center has been really focused on the professional learning system as a comprehensive and cohesive way to think about getting effective educators into schools to support improved outcomes for students with disabilities. We take a lens to policy, certification and licensure systems, preparation programs, program and practitioner evaluation, and thinking about that all with an eye towards equity and access. We've been looking at high leverage practices as a way to give common language and common understanding to some of those critical practices that every educator can take with them into the classroom and then build their content and evidence-based practice pedagogy on top of. So we see that as foundational. Additionally, we think about contextualized knowledge. How does culturally relevant pedagogy and practice look in any given classroom, in any given community across our country? To quote Aaron, we have a need for improved educational systems that promote a seamless academic progression for our students, and I'll add preparation for our candidates. Kathy and Bob honed in on the importance of coherence and preparation that begins when pre-service educators enter our programs all the way through the early years of their career. If we don't support them well, then we will lose them before they become veterans. So developing and refining programs for improved coherence will allow our candidates to have a common language upon which to build a common understanding. With this in mind, they can focus then on the generative nature of developing pedagogical knowledge and skill, high leverage practices, and that expertise that'll be needed to support our most vulnerable learners. This provides a nice foundation for content-specific practice. The opportunities to learn that they are afforded in practice must occur with expert feedback. Bob and Aaron both touched on the utility of simulations in varied contexts, such as home or school, and then also getting that ongoing feedback. Kathy extended these ideas about practice, describing ideas for establishing and capitalizing on partnerships with local school districts and other educator preparation providers to expand the knowledge and skills of candidates to areas that they might not have access to. So for instance, she described a rural-urban partnership. That preparation experience must move from authentic in-classroom or in-university experiences to in-field. They have to have supervision and mentorship that extends their ability to take that content knowledge that they've learned in the classroom and apply it aptly in the field. Both Aaron and Naomi talked about this. How do we provide residency opportunities for our candidates so that they feel competent and confident in their ability to support the learners they're in front of every day? Research has shown that 50% or more of teachers graduating from educator preparation programs housed at universities complete programs close to home. Naomi described strategies to proactively address teacher shortages through innovative preparation programs and taking those programs to the people. I know that Grow Your Own programs have grown in prominence, and the more we learn about them, the more they are seen as a way to leverage not only the best that we know about preparing teachers, but also the cultural wealth, the community knowledge that individuals in those schools and community contexts bring to the education experience for students. Other elements of the conversation that I think we have to really pay close attention to are ways to address the challenges that commonly come up. Funding came up in several parts of our conversation. How do we make sure that those who might be really effective educators don't see finances as a barrier? Kathy mentioned OSEP leadership grants as an opportunity, and I'll share my own experience. I graduated from a program in my doctoral studies where I had the opportunity to be supported by an OSEP leadership grant. Even before that, I was an out-of-field teacher, but I enrolled in a program at a university that was a funded program by OSEP to address teacher shortages at that time. So I am grateful and appreciative of the opportunities to learn really focused ways to improve outcomes for students with disabilities with support from OSEP. Another piece of that is how we prepare teachers, reimagining what that field experience might look like. As Naomi mentioned, residency models are a great way to give just-in-time, real-time, in-practice support to pre-service educators or those in-service educators gaining their credential. So that's also a way to think about how do we remove the barrier from the classroom at the university to the classroom in the local school. And then the working conditions created. How do we make sure that leaders are not only prepared to support the students that they're in charge of, but the teachers? General education and special education can't operate in silos. We have to make sure that all educators are there for them to meet the needs of all of the students in their care. And we have to start that experience in preparation. We can't expect pre-service general education teachers and special education teachers to know how to do that work together well in the classroom if we don't give those preparation opportunities with support. And finally, I'll touch on the fact that this is, again, seamless. It has to be a seamless approach. Thinking about policy, licensure and certification, opportunities to hone skills throughout the career, and making sure that those who we expect to be good mentors and supervisors are in the classroom when we need them. Those pre-service teachers and early career teachers need experts who have had long and successful careers in supporting students with disabilities. So I thank you for your time, Lori. I thank you for the opportunity to share my experience and to think about what my colleagues have shared. Innovation is the way to do this.
Thank you, Erica. As we close out day 2 of our summit, my head is swirling with possibilities. And as I said yesterday, I continue to feel inspired and motivated. I am missing our chance to continue conversations in the hallway, but thank you all for your engagement in the chat and Q&A. I'm learning from our presenters, but I'm also learning from your ideas and comments. Aaron, Kathy, Naomi, Bob, and Erica, Thank you for sharing your expertise, experiences, passion, and innovative ideas. You have given us a lot to think about. In my opening remarks, I talked about encouraging us to extend our traditional vision of teacher preparation beyond formal training into their initial years. Teacher preparation has to be a shared responsibility, beginning with formal preparation programs, but extending to school districts and professional organizations to continue to grow our novice teachers into the expert professionals we need in every school. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you will come back tomorrow when we explore improving retention of effective personnel. You can register at OSEP Ideas That Work, and within a week, a recording of today's event, along with the new web resources, will also be on that site. Thank you for joining us.